Hi, everyone. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in the following podcast belong solely to the host and its contributors. They are not necessarily the views of our employers, organizations, committees, or other group or individual.
Well, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Brewing with BIM. I'm Joe Whitney. With me, as always, is my buddy Dave Campbell. What's up, Dave?
Oh, not much, Joe. How are you doing?
Doing well, doing well. Looking forward to our guest here. We've got Greg Hale from Hale Technology in Practice. What's up, Greg?
How you doing, guys?
Doing well. So, man, just got done telling us that you're beat. You had a long day. You're cracking open a beer right now, I imagine. Relaxing, soaking it all in. All right. What are you drinking?
So we had to stop by the local Sheets, those in Pennsylvania know here, and we're trying a a Purple Monkey dishwasher chocolate peanut butter porter.
Oh yeah, that sounds amazing.
That is it's an earful by all means. So the company is Evil Genius.
All right,
Beer.
Man, they sound like some evil geniuses. I like that.
The website, as it's tagged, is evilgenius.beer, and they say, "Oh yeah, it's not .com, it's .beer."
I love it. Sheets doesn't have a large beer section. They have a pretty small walk-in cooler that you can go into, but the beers that they have, so they've got like your typical domestics, but they're like IPAs and the regional and all that stuff. It's an interesting little mix.
Yeah, I was able to find some good stuff, and I always love trying to figure out what's local and what's a little bit different than hometown.
Well, you've got a lot of local beers where you're at. You guys are, Beer City, USA, essentially. I don't know how many breweries up in Rochester, but it seems like you guys got more than a few dozen.
It feels a little endless for sure.
Some good, some not so good, but I won't go there just yet.
Little High Falls Brew and some Jenny Cream Ale.
I like Jenny. The cream ale is not too bad. It's the what is that one? The Big Flats or whatever. They were selling. I lived in Texas, and they were selling it for like 40 cents a can. That should have been my first guess. I forgot who does it. Maybe it's Saranac or Genesee. I don't remember which one it is, but it's like, man, they were just getting rid of some leftovers. Anyways, man, I won't knock any breweries. I love beer. All beer, most beer at least. Dave, what do you drink, bud?
It's funny. My mom actually told me about a cocktail earlier in the week that she was excited to try, and I went to the liquor store tonight. And I'm like, that's what I want. And it's funny because Greg's talking about his chocolate peanut butter porter over there, and I decided to make a peanut butter and jelly cocktail. I used peanut butter whiskey and raspberry liqueur.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You guys are drinking like meals in a can. That's like some crazy.
Now, if you could only smoke it, it'd be that much better.
Oh man,
This is true.
I'm sure you've tried smoking that before, right, David?
I wouldn't say no.
Yeah. I am keeping it classic here. I'm sipping on some semi-cheap, inexpensive, I guess, whiskey. It's Aberfield, 12-year-old Scotch. I'm not doing anything radical like you guys today. I just haven't had time to go to the beer store, and I've got whiskey on my shelves for days, so that's where I'm at.
Nice, dude. Heck yeah, sounds good.
You guys don't normally go for the appetizers with it, but we had an interesting one today, which I've got over on the side, stopping at an Amish food market for lunch, and they had chocolate dipped bacon.
Oh man, there you go.
That's a nice companion for the peanut butter porter.
Heck yeah. What's funny is I've been getting more and more into hunting lately. And one of the things I keep reading, if you're backpacking, you're doing these, 4, 5, 6, 7-day trips. One good thing to have in your pack is to take tortillas, put peanut butter and bacon in it, and then just Ziploc them or whatever. And apparently they provide enough like protein and kick, and they, they're filling, it's good, and you can kind of push out throughout an entire day with it. It's like, wow, I did not know that was a thing.
Interesting.
I wish I could say I hadn't tried peanut butter and bacon before.
I've tried it. I like it.
But there were many a drunk occasions where I don't know, man. I don't know what I was thinking, but I had like peanut butter and eggs.
Try that. I'm like, I'm on it.
Oh man, crazy. Well, we didn't come here to talk about the life of peanut butter and bacon and all that fun stuff. We're here to find out more about scanning. We got Greg Hale on the line. For those guys that don't know, Greg is the man when it comes to scan technology. You are like the poster boy for ClearEdge, it seems like. I see you everywhere on ClearEdge stuff.
They've been nice to me, for sure.
Well, I love it just because they're now part of our TopCon family. So, no complaints from me.
So that means we're all part of the family now then. That's good.
Yep. That's
yes,
it.
sir. Yes, sir. All right. So if you don't mind, I'd love to get a quick background on you. How'd you get into scanning? Hale TIP is obviously your company. You got a few people underneath you now. You guys seems like doing everything: LiDAR, drones, BIM modeling, all kinds of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Coordination, yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah. So, my journey is not too far fetched from a lot of other people who've kind of come up through CAD management and BIM management. I actually kind of kicked out of school in about 2000 as a structural engineer. Worked for several years with a structural steel fabricator and erector. So they kind of threw me to the fire as a project manager coming out of school and running $1 million jobs and having contractors jump down your throat real quick on the young kid on the block, and learned a lot of things really fast out in the field. And with all that stress coming in as a young kid, like 22, 23 years old, and working on the job sites, you know what, maybe I should use that engineering degree for something. And I had actually gone out to school in Reno, Nevada. That's the West Coast boy. And my wife was from Rochester, New York. We met there in college, and she convinced me to make the leap. We were making the change over to engineering, and shifted over to the East Coast for a while. Signed up for an architecture and engineering firm, did some structural engineering, and I'd say very traditional stuff for a number of years. And then this Revit thing came along, and it changed everybody's world. And I was one of the people that kind of jump on that boat pretty quick. And it was right about 2006, 2007. So, one of those kind of leading tech guys. Got the company through the big transition. It took several years, and there was a lot of other companies out there that really needed help. We'd started up a Revit users group. Had a lot of people going, you know what, our firm is outstanding. We have a license of Revit. We have got a few more people that want to jump on, but we're really kind of hacking it. We need help. So kind of saw an opportunity there where there was, enough small firms out there or even bigger firms that could just use some help. And then the scanning thing came along as well, closer to 2013, 14. And it's kind of this nice marriage between knowing Revit, knowing a lot of BIM technology, knowing the design industry and the construction industry, and then scanning come along with this nice new tech thing that people were really, sketchy to try. So jumped on that boat after doing a couple jobs with it. Could really see it as a service. So more or less jumped out as a 50-50, doing scanning, doing BIM consulting, BIM modeling, and it's just kind of grown from there. So since 2014, for the last 6.5 years, just kind of grown up and then expanded all around that core of, Revit and BIM services, kind of you name it, anything that revolves around that, and then scanning. So and scanning has been real good to me, and then also a lot of kind of under the radar consulting, get a lot of firms really up to the speed that they need to be at.
You guys are kind of like the one-stop shop for BIM. It sounds like you are in a very unique position. It's kind of like where Dave and I just see the merging of the hardware side of things and actually the software side. Scanning, it really is mass data, talking about ClearEdge and Edgewise, and actually, producing models from the scan data. It's actually something Dave and I are very, very fond of. We Dave's a clear edge guy. He plays with it all day long and helps do training and consulting, all that fun stuff too. But that's just an awesome thing to be in. Like, I don't know, man, you seem very passionate about what you do, and you're 14 years in now. Are you still just as passionate as you were back then?
Yeah, it's endless. I mean, it just keeps going. You know, I do say I would have thought Revit would have fallen off a long time ago, and there would have been something brand new and shiny, but there hasn't been. So that is just nice kind of repetition. And scanning has just become a solid core thing, and it gets a little bit faster, a little easier. And but there's always people in need, and the engineer in me always wants to kind of come in and be the superhero and help people out.
I love it. I love it. Are you seeing, so I chat with a lot of firms about like scanning services and what they're doing, in the wake of COVID. Are they, going on site as much? And always the answer is obviously no, but they're always more like, well, what can we do to capture data so that we're not on job sites, that we're adhering to all these safety policies? What can we do? And scanning is almost always front of the line. Are you seeing kind of more of a, I wouldn't say boom, but yeah, more of a boom, more of a presence for scanning nowadays?
I think there's definitely a presence. I wouldn't say there's been a big shift for us. It's been a mixed bag because we've had a lot of clients pull back. We've had some clients, we had some pretty big jobs lined up, and because they, were seeing some upcoming work and they wanted to keep their own staff moving, they went ahead and purchased on their own, and went ahead with scanning internally rather than outsourcing it and kind of staying in the design mode. They said, you know what, we want to keep our staff hired, so let's do this internally, keep them working, and keep things going. So we've seen a shift there. Some people pulling back on budgets, but at other times, like you said, whether it's they don't want to travel or they really just need to get the digital twin out there fast so they don't have to travel to the job site. So we've seen a pickup there, but also a downside of budgets and people kind of doing it on their own.
What would you say like the biggest pushback to adopting like scanning would be that you've seen so far?
It's always the people and not the technology. So it's, do you have the right staff that really wants to do this? It's like architects really want to be architects. They don't really want to be on site measuring stuff.
Yeah.
Engineers are kind of middle of the road. Some guys really like the site work, but for the most part, we just were out all day scanning a production facility. It's kind of hard work. It's a long day. You're on your feet. It's a little bit more work than a tape measure.
Yeah. Oh, well, that and I think another part of that would be, you have to have someone that is well versed in not only knowing how to operate the scanner, but also processing that data, right? Because that's a big part of, a huge part of transitioning that data into the as-built, into the design programs and things like that. But I guess, I've also seen that myself, that pushback because it's going to take time, or it costs money, or, you need to find somebody that has that background already in order to benefit from it.
And they have to do it enough that they're not going to forget it and have to relearn it every time. That's the other thing that we see. Goes to your point about the right people, right?
Yeah, so often it's like, oh yeah, these aren't that expensive, and the technology really is. It really will pay for itself, but it's not just the technology. Are you going to keep up to using it? Are you going to have the staff that's going to maintain it? Is that person going to go away and now you're left with a scanner sitting on a shelf?
Yeah.
And we've seen that happen a number of times. So it's a big investment to not fully go after it, and you kind of got to visualize it as a survey department, right? Are you going to build a department that does this? And do you have enough work, repetitive work, to keep being out in the field and measuring things?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that was a valid point, though, about architects not wanting, they're wanting to be architects, not wanting to measure things. I had a mouthful of comments, some good, some bad, about architects measuring things. So I'll leave it at that, man.
Now, the interesting thing to think about, though, is as scanners continue to, and technology itself continues to, kind of get better, right? Or kind of maybe not even get better, but allows itself to be used for so many, different things. Like we're starting to see some of the other smaller handheld scanners that are producing, masses pretty much instantly as they're walking around, or, just actually with images, right? We have the conversion now of images into point clouds. I see the use of it kind of expanding, and like my background was in architecture. I saw the use of scanning because then I didn't have to go out there with a tape measure and try to make sure that I measure every single thing there. If I didn't document it correctly, it's another field visit, and it's going to be another field visit anyways to double check it, because you have to. And then you have to drag so many people out with you. And I mean, I got to the point where, I was using either a tape measure or you use a laser, right, to shoot those distances. But you're still crawling everywhere in that building, taking pictures, spending so much time going through that building, if it's an existing project, obviously, but to document that. And I think, as again, scanning continues to kind of go down this line, or improve on itself, and we see these different use cases, I think we'll see that buy-in from everybody eventually, but they have to make it to a point of where it's usable, right? It's simple.
Well, yeah. So you mentioned a few different types of scanners there. I run into this quite a bit. Like I'll get a scan from somebody and it doesn't fit the need of the intended purpose of the scan, right? So I want to, take measurements, or I want something, just as a mesh, or something just as a backdrop, or I want to document existing conditions, or maybe I want it as an as-built, or like there are so many different avenues we can go down with the intended use of the point cloud. Are you seeing, maybe Davey, you mentioned these handheld scanners and stuff like that. Are you seeing some benefits from them, or is it mostly just for the internal, interim, the beginning stuff? Just curious to get your take on that.
Well, I think we're a little bit of a transition point with the handheld or the backpack scanners, the mobile. It's getting very close to being as good as the terrestrial scanners, but not quite there. So you really got to dig into the scope of the work on whether that scanner is going to meet the need or not. So it all comes down usually to point density. So are there enough points on the surface of that object to be able to model from it? And usually the breaking point that I use is, do you need to see pipes? And if you need to see pipes, do you need to see 4-inch pipes, or do you need to see 2-inch pipes or smaller? And it's this thing where a lot of times they say, nah, we don't really need that. And then you go out, and if you're to deliver at that level of detail, they come back and you say, well, we actually needed that now that we're at a different stage of the project. So I prefer to kind of go down the more conservative path and take more density, take more measurements than you really need, and then you find more uses for that, rather than going with a tool that isn't quite as good and then coming back and saying, I wish I just had a little bit more. So, some great examples of that, going out to jobs, you're scanning, and then you come back and say, well, guess what? That floor is not flat. And, the reason we know it's flat is we just took like 30 million points on that floor, and we can do a heat map, and guess what? It's like 6 inches out of level. And when you come back with some other scanner, it's not quite as accurate. It's in and out 6 inches or so. You can't really tell. But that you find these unintended uses for it now that you have so much data. So, we're at that cusp. I think it's going to transition over in the near future as these get a little bit faster and stronger, a little bit more mobile. I'd say within the next 2 years or so. And then it's just got to meet the right price point. But, there's a lot of good use cases for, especially like university campuses, going around and doing an entire campus. You don't need high level of detail. You just need to know position of buildings. Or if it's all architectural, you need to know floor plans and ceiling heights. No problem. You can do low density. But as soon as you cross that threshold of needing more, you got to kind of dial it up. So I tend to go with a tool that can do a little bit more.
I like it, Joey. Hashtag SwoleBIM. That's I'm always for more information. If I have more information than I need, I feel like it's a good thing, right?
You're that guy that has too many tools and then figures he'll just use them later. Like,
dude,
I'll figure something
use
to build
that
them
eventually.
Yeah. I love it, man.
Oh man. Oh, so This is a great conversation. Thank you so much again for joining us, Greg. I always love being able to talk to other people that are passionate about our industry and kind of again people like yourself who are on the kind of front line of that change. You guys have seen how it has changed, how it's evolved throughout the years. You guys are involved in these processes such as scan to BIM, integrated facility management, trade coordination. There's so many different things that you guys kind of transition into. Do you find yourselves, I guess, using that scan data in more ways than just, let's say, as building?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's one of those things when you know what the tool does, you start to find, like I said, all those different uses for it. So, a lot of times we come on to job sites for a completely different purpose, and you say, you know what, we could use this for, a couple of other things as well. Or we know that there's other avenues for this, like different people who can use this data. So even though maybe we're scanning for an architect, we know that there's a mechanical engineer on their team and an electrical engineer, and there's also the contractors, and each one has a different use case for it. So we might say, you know what, for let's say another $1,000, we could get above the ceiling, and then you could hand this off to your engineer, and you could actually charge them for it. So when we start to get some talks going about how can more of the people benefit from this, and this is usually where I dial back and say, what is your scope? What are you trying to accomplish? And not just necessarily your scope, but what's the entire scope of the project? What's the phasing look like? What are you trying to accomplish? And when we start to get down to the meat of it, we start to get beyond their personal purpose and get down to the overall purpose of the project and say, you know what, well, we could also use this scan data for this and this and this. A lot of time it is construction purposes and tying into old buildings, but other times you guys are very well aware of like construction verification. So after you've gone through a lot of virtual design and construction or virtual design, you need to verify or validate that that plumber actually put that pipe where you told him to put it. And it's not that easy to do. That's a lot of measurements. So when you start to build in a repetitive scan process, it becomes kind of infinitely valuable. Like at different stages of the project, these things become very, very important. So seeing the whole project really benefits, and seeing all the other benefits that things like the field measurements and scanning can do. So verification is a big one. We're pushing the industry that way more and more, and we've kind of had to go out there and prove it first. So kind of offer some free services and say, you know what, we'll go out and we'll scan this first. We're going to show you the data and show you how bad it is, and then you can pay us later.
I like that. I like it. Because at that point, the data just shows itself. The proof is in the pudding, as they say.
Yeah.
So, man, I know we could go on talking about scanning all day, but I do want to kind of touch on some of the other things that you guys do as well. Especially, we kind of get to talking about visualizing the entire project. And I keep touching back on this, but coordination, I think, the discipline coordination is a huge part of our industry. And, with more integration that we've seen with, Navisworks, BIM 360, Revit, we're starting to see some of these kind of clashes, automated clash detection, things like that start to kind of span out and become, almost standard, right? Anymore, I think it's standard. Yeah.
Yeah, I like the word prevalent a little better. I wouldn't call it quite standard. I think you got to take project scale into account. So a lot of these bigger projects, I'd say it's definitely prevalent. But when you start getting into a lot of the smaller projects, let's say 25 million and below, it's pretty hard to find.
Really? Why? So why do you think that would be?
There's less to coordinate. And not only is there less to coordinate, there's less of a budget for BIM.
Okay.
Yeah, there's kind of an interesting kind of take on it. And I think a lot of it has to do with the construction managers and general contractors that are on these projects. So when you get beyond a certain scale, there's a level of risk, and that level of risk goes way up. And these are the teams that you start to see the VDC teams popping up at. I had an interesting year last year. A great company, Whiting Turner. They're out of DC, I think, is their headquarters.
Yeah, we're from there.
And they talk to how they've grown their BIM department over the last few years, and they're like, oh yeah, a few years ago we were like 5 people, in a single office, and now we're up to like 91 in our BIM department. It's like, oh my God, that's validation that this is a profession at this point. Yep. They're really growing up. But at the same time, a lot of these smaller projects, we're actually doing a lot of things like schoolwork, where these projects are 20, 25 million or less, $5 million jobs. It really is low bidder. And, these people don't think they have the room to go out and coordinate and validate and do other things. And they don't see that level of risk necessarily. Mm-hmm. They certainly can't afford a BIM department. They certainly can't always afford a 3D modeler or a Revit modeler compared to, someone who's drafting for $20 an hour. Mm-hmm. There's kind of this different scale factor that plays into it.
Okay. Well, there's a whole mindset too, right? So if we're talking about a $25 million project, are we going to be able to get an owner to pay for, BIM, right? If we say that we want to do coordination, clash detection, whatever, we're going to have a write-in, it's in our contract. They're going to pay us X amount of money for this process. Whoever's leading the process gets the bulk of the money, that sort of thing, right? That's typical, but the issue is at $25 million, the owner isn't really concerned about a BIM. There's no deliverable for BIM for an owner at a $25 million and under project. There's no complex systems. There's no integrations with an FM component typically. There's maintenance schedules and that sort of stuff, but it's not as dire or pressing as, say, a larger project. And with that, there's they don't have anybody on staff that even knows how to use that data, right? Even if they did have an FM person, that FM person is a glorified, I'm not going to say glorified because that's a bad way of putting it, but they're more or less not attuned to using CAD software. They want PDFs, they want O&M manuals, they want that sort of stuff, and it doesn't necessarily have to be this big filled model that they can utilize. So at that point, here's a big misnomer with BIM. We talk about BIM, this total BIM, and BIM being for the owner. Oh, really? It's about integrating all this data, and 97% of the building's life of costs happen after its life cycle or after a construction life cycle, that sort of stuff. We tout those numbers, but at the end of the day, the bulk of the BIM that we do is just for the trades and the GC. Everything else beyond that is it's got a very unique owner.
Yeah. Well, I guess the question there, or the kind of topic of thought there would be, does the project, I guess, with the ROI for that project, would BIM make sense, right?
Oh, all the time. Because I believe in it.
Well, exactly. See, that's kind of what I'm thinking as well. With a $25 million project with adopting BIM, and kind of as we're talking here, I've heard a lot of people have issues because of the cost of it, or they don't have people who
for the extra level of detail, who's paying for 3D modeling.
Yeah.
Lowest cost. Greg, you had a tremendous point there when you said lowest cost wins, and that's 100% of the time. Lowest cost is not a BIM, like it's not a 3D modeler. It's somebody who's kicking out floor plans, and there's no. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, you're good. I was just thinking, my thought process about that, though, is I wonder if we stood back and compared something like the entire project cost, not just the design cost and the design time and everything like that, but the entire project cost itself compared to, let's say, a similar size project that used BIM.
So rather than selling the everybody involved on the project, sell the owner on the importance of BIM. Like, this is how much time on a project BIM could save you if you mandated BIM on your project, and then you'd have to define LODs and all that stuff. Yep. But having that information, that's how much it could save. That's pretty good, because we do have statistics. We can show. I use this pretty common graphic about it's Revit versus AutoCAD, and sorry.
I guess on the no, dude, you're good. I was just thinking, like, on the flip side of that coin, with the adoption of BIM, I know this is something we wanted to kind of touch on tonight, anyways. It's if you put garbage in, you get garbage out, right? You got to put some effort and put some data into these models, such as with our are specifications, right? If you're putting specs, if you're like making these families and placing these types of warranty information or just whatever specification information you can place into those models, it needs to be like that data that's going in there needs to be good, right? If
Yeah.
you're just giving people these little dynamic blocks or these things, these, you know, families with maybe a couple connections and things like that that don't really have too much data in it, you're costing the people down the line more time and more effort, right? And the overall project itself has to be, I mean, it would cost more. I would think it would have to be, it would slow it down and it would cost more, right?
Yeah.
So it's got to be, if when we get into it, I think you got to, if you get into it, you got to do it right.
So you said specifications earlier, and that reminded me of our previous conversation with Greg. And you brought up three topics, three things that were worth mentioning. And 2 and 3 I was going about, but this first one, coordination specifications. I agree with you. We are seeing some poorly written specifications out there on projects. As they go out for bid. People don't know what they're asking. They don't know how to ask. Like there's so much information missing from this. So I just wanted to get your take on this because you clearly had something in mind.
Well, I've got kind of two avenues to give you a kind of context of why I think this is a good topic. So on one side, I've spent the last couple of years consulting for a major grocery retail, and really getting built into their system a good set of specs where they're really defining not just for their design team, but also for the construction team, this is what you're going to do. So when you get that laid out, it makes a huge difference in building a set of standards and actually providing everybody with the right tools to say, here's how we really want you to do it. So it cuts a lot of corners. They don't have to figure it out. They get it done, and they can throw out a really good spec, and everybody's got to live by it. That way it's built into the cost of the project. And it's a nice way to kind of keep it out there and competitive. A really good written spec is kind of really where it all sits. The other avenue is kind of from a different angle. We found when COVID hit that we were going to have to kind of change up our game a little bit. We would typically kind of sit back and wait for a contractor to call us. We've got lots of good relationships, and it would be on that project that required BIM, right? Nobody would call us until the specs actually said they had to do it. So once that spec was written that said, hey, you have to provide coordination drawings, and sometimes it would say, it has to be provided in 3D. We would get the phone call, we'd provide a price, away we go. And it's a nice position to be in to just kind of sit back and wait. But we felt like we had to be a bit more aggressive. So, just like any other trade contractor, we said, you know what, we better go out and get aggressive and try to bid this work. So let's set up on a project bid site. Let's look at all the jobs that are out there. Let's find specs that require BIM or something close to it, and let's call people and say, you know what? Hey, we see that you're bidding this job and it requires 3D coordination. We'd like to give you a price to do that. And we've had a lot of great success, really. Getting a lot of exposure. Getting people ringing our phone and say, hey, we're also bidding this job and this job and this job. So a little bit more of a safety net. But what we found as we started doing that is this huge range of specifications that are out there. And some are extraordinarily awful. And really what it comes down to is, when an architect or a design team is writing specs, they usually pay for a service like an AIA master spec service that gives them a vanilla spec. And then they can kind of tweak it a little bit based upon, what their needs are. So there are specs out there that will say, hey, you're going to provide 8 copies of this drawing in 7 copies in plain paper and 3 copies in Mylar. And, we're going to overlay this on a light table, and we're going to go through this coordination process. There's stuff out there because people don't even look at that spec. There's others, this can kind of lead into another topic is say, hey, we've got a BIM model, but we're not going to provide it. You are going to get PDFs, and that's all you're going to get. And there's kind of middle of the road, and some say, hey, you're going to get AutoCAD backgrounds. And there's others that will say, hey, you're going to get a full Revit model, and you're going to deal with that. And so there's this kind of very big, wide variety, and most contractors don't know what to do with that. All they know what to do is call somebody else and say, hey, can you help me figure out a price of this so that I can add it to my cost or find a way to get around it to make sure my bid is lower than the next guy so I actually get this work. So there's a kind of a wide range, and I would love to see an advancement of those specification, a new baseline, because I really hate to see so many firms out there designing in 3D and doing design coordination in 3D and saying, but by the way, we're not going to hand off even a CAD file. You're going to get PDFs. Those are the contract documents, and you're going to start over. But we still want you to coordinate the job. So,
so I've seen that happen before, and typically it was because of poorly drawn models to begin with. The reason why they say, "Oh, we're not handing over the model," is because one, it's they don't want to assume risk, liability, anybody doing anything with it down line. There's an easy way to get over that. You put in some verbiage, make somebody sign something, and you assume no liability or responsibility for the correctness of this model, and then away you go. But at least most of the model's intact. But the other part, the major part that I see, is that they fudge so many things, the dimensions, everything has been, really it boils down to people not being as efficient in Revit as we would like them to be, right?
Right.
Is that what you're kind of seeing too, or do you think there's something else to it?
Well, there is a wide variety of it. I had an interesting one recently. There was the firm I'd actually taken through and is actually pretty sophisticated in Revit, probably the best in Rochester. And we ended up getting a project that we bid that was their design project. We won the job. We were ready to work on it. And then oh, great, this is my old design firm. I'll get a design model from them. It's, it'll save us some time. Call them up and say, sorry, you're not getting a design model. It was all just about a new project manager. They weren't used to the system. They weren't confident that the team provided what they needed, and they saw themselves kind of open up to risk. So they said, no, we're not going to do it. It doesn't require us. It's going to take us out of our comfort zone. So we're not going to sign off on that. So, we see some hesitation because of lack of confidence in their team that, what they're providing is good background. And that's not necessarily good. It's not a good sign that they're not confident with the 3D models that they're creating, but are confident in their documents. But it kind of gets at the, into my bones when I see, like my old firm backing off, and I told them, hey, what's happening? You guys are regressing. This isn't good. We need to correct this and correct it fast. And some more management assured me that they were going to move forward and be a little smarter about it, but they still weren't going to hand over the model.
Well, this definitely ties into the next topic that you mentioned, was the sharing of BIM models from design teams. You had mentioned that you're seeing a resurgence of design firms refusing to share design models or attempting to, I'm reading verbatim here, charge extraordinary amounts of money to share. Why is there another backlash? How do we resolve it? And why do we keep offering 2D exports? Honestly, I think it's because we can, right? It's what people, hey, look, I'm going to provide the 2D because that's what I'm comfortable providing at this time. And
I think
what
it's
you
ridiculous. I don't know, dude. I think with all the technology that we have today to share and coordinate data, I think that, we need to adopt that. And I mean, I understand everybody needs to make money. Everybody needs to make money. I fully support that. But we gotta come together as an industry and figure out, Joey and I, we talked about this earlier, better timelines for handover, actually handing over a model, that is, I guess, to the level of detail that's expected, or at least contracted, right? And when we can or how we can adjust this process to when people do receive that data. But also, again, I don't know, man. I don't think that I don't think people should be charging like that to get these design models.
This is something that we're going to talk about a lot more on several episodes. We're going to talk about this because this all comes back to contractual obligations. We're not contracted to do this. If you want this data, you're going to have to pay us for it. I worked, so I spent time on the survey side, getting construction layout, and that got me into BIM. And damn near every one of those disciplines, it's always been about we'll provide 2D data and we'll send it to you. Even the civil side, we'll provide 2D data. We'll create this 3D model in Civil 3D. We'll create all this rich information and then explode the hell out of it, and then that's our deliverable.
Yeah. here's something that really gets to the heart of it for all of these topics that I learned kind of in the design industry. So as I started to learn some more, is it does all come down to the client. Where's that money coming from? The client, in most respects, for the vast majority of jobs, is an unsophisticated client. So if you're talking about, the next nursing home or school building, et cetera, these are people that are sitting on boards that are running these businesses that, their profession is not building buildings. They don't know how to do this. They go out and they trust an architect. They hire an architect or a design team to provide those services, but they don't know what they're getting. They don't know what to ask for. And they don't have that level of sophistication to say, you know what, I really need BIM. I really need these extra deliverables to serve as risk management so that I'm not paying huge change orders when I hire my contractor. And when you look at that level of sophistication, it's bound and determined to work its way down the line. So if it's not specified, it's not going to be provided, and you're going to get lower levels of service. And then you guys know how it works with a change order system. These guys will bid low, they'll win the job, which is the first important part, and they'll come back and they will make more money on change orders because they know there are so many errors in those drawings.
Yeah, so my favorite graphic is the two boats next to each other. It's contracted, amount, and then change order. And the change orders is, contracted amounts is like little tiny skipper of a boat, and then contracted or change orders is this giant freaking yacht. Just really telling for those of you guys that don't know. You make your money on the change orders,
right? And so we're undermining that system. If we have a really good set of coordination and BIM documents, et cetera, that change order system goes away. And so bids are truly more competitive and more in line with where they should be. And unfortunately, I think, being exposed to that, I don't know that it will change because the vast majority of clients will remain unsophisticated clients. It's their first time building a building, and it's going to be their last time building a building. So, the only ones where that is, I believe, is really going to happen are things like universities and hospitals where they have a team of facilities professionals that say, you know what, we screwed this up last time. The next one we're going to do, we're changing this. We're going to specify these high level requirements so we don't get hit with those change orders.
Yeah. And I actually have a similar story. We know this government agency that they required BIM on a project and specify new in the BIM world, like, yeah, give us some BIM, whatever, we'll pay X amount for it. They got raked over the coals. Their facility flooded. Their O&M manuals were in that facility.
Yep.
They were like, oh, it's okay. We'll go back to the BIM model and it'll give us the information we needed. The BIM model actually had no data in it. They hired a third-party consultant team to go through it. There was like nothing in it. There was no warranty information. There was nothing. So a few years later, they're kicking themselves, or just it's probably 5 years, and they're just like down in the dumps about it. And it was a new project coming up, and they go over the top. They have educated themselves. They spent millions hiring consultants to make sure that this never happens to them again. So they are no longer a dumb, I would say uneducated owner, right? They've progressed. But again, government agencies, healthcare's, data companies, pharmaceutical companies, universities. These are the ones that have the educated owners in my mind, or at least the ability to recover from a loss of an uneducated project.
Yeah. So I personally think that's kind of where it lies. And I don't know that it's going to change, because how do you change the industry where it's the first time buyer every time?
Yep.
I think then it probably falls onto it's all, again, this falls back to the contract types and, who's the owner's rep, who's, who.
Well, I think it goes to communication. It's a big key.
Well, so the subcontractor is not communicating to the owner what they need on a project. That just doesn't happen, especially on a smaller project, right? So maybe the GC might have a contact, but typically the architectural firm has a contact. Maybe they have a CM, contract manager they've hired, or maybe the architect is the owner's rep, and you have to, the architect's your only point of contact. So then, like, are you trusting the architect to give your information? So it really does become about communication. How does this conversation become full circle where you can educate the owner? We know a lot of GCs that just have a phenomenal relationship with specific, smaller builders, right? So their first one just went really well. The GC treated them right, and therefore they've got the business for life. So maybe that's what it takes. Maybe it takes somebody stepping outside and saying, hey, look, this isn't right. We'll go ahead and go the extra mile on this project in order to, hopefully form a relationship with them to win the next one and then the next one. And maybe they're not discouraged and thrown out of the market. Maybe they're not going to lose their butt, right? And they'll be an owner of several buildings. I don't know, man. I'm just, I'm not going to be able to solve all the world's problems. I'm just here to rant and drink your whiskey, guys. That's it.
Well, I think it's that, and just communication, not just within, GC subcontractors, but owners themselves reaching out to other people who own businesses in the area, or just communication in that sense in general. If we can start sharing instead of siloing a lot of this information, hey, my project was very successful, this is what we did, okay, my project is a little bit different, but how can we adapt this to that, right? And also, I think that's another kind of key piece to where owners need to look for these BIM consultants. If you don't have, a knowledge base in this, don't just go through it blind and expect to figure your way out. People will give you some brilliant renderings, but I think there needs to, that has smart data in it.
I think that's what it's going to take to get out of this whole COVID mess, right? So, again, chatted with this gentleman who we're hoping to get on a future episode here in November, who works in the workspace environment, right? He sells workplaces as an architect. He thinks strategy with these owners about where they should set up their offices and what they should think about. COVID's definitely put a hamper on that, right? Before COVID, I think they said something like at most the average was like 60%. You were in your desk 60% of the time. The other 40% of the time somebody was off, the water cooler talk, in meetings, grabbing lunch, whatever of their business day, right? Or they're traveling to Harrisburg to do scans or whatever, wherever you're at, man. I have no clue. But right, they're doing all this stuff and they're not at their desk. And so the whole future of the workplace environment is not that, it's totally just going to change. So his whole thought was, well, if we're never going to get back to normal, if we're always going to, maybe we're going to settle in at 35% for the next 5 years, if that's what it looks like, how do we recover as an industry, as the AEC as a whole? How do we, get owners engaged? How do we get building? How do we do all this stuff? So really, I think what's going to happen is real estate might come down a bit, but I'm just speculating here. But there might be more smaller first-time buyers to come out and, take on these projects. And if that happens, how do you, I guess, kind of go out of your way to make sure that you have more projects with them in the future and they're not scorned on that first one?
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to anticipate. Really hard to anticipate. If you do, let me know.
Man, if I could predict the future, I'm buying a lottery ticket tomorrow. I'm just saying.
I'm investing in a lot of stock.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Made that mistake several times. All right. So next topic, man. This is one that I could talk about till I'm blue in the face because it's a big pet peeve of mine. It kind of ties into number 2 where people aren't sharing BIM models. But even if they are sharing BIM models, how is your deliverable PDF documents and 2D CAD as-built? How is that a sufficient? I know the reason why people accept it, but how are we still as an industry providing that when really we should, almost in my mind, look, we put all this time and effort into creating a 3D model. Why are people still just requesting the 2D and the PDF?
Yeah,
I'm going to take it on a little tangent of something that came up this week.
I love it. Go ahead.
So, very, very similar workflow, but, we do a lot of work, let's say in Revit and especially in the MEP design, and we get all fancy with colors and say, this system, this supply air is blue and this return air is green.
Yeah,
and
your color schemas.
All this stuff.
Yeah.
And, we dumb that down onto a 2D piece of paper and we make it all black and white. And the reason is because somebody wants to print it. And when we look at, the consumption of these prints these days, like how many times are people actually printing this document? Let's say out of 10 times, someone looks at this, how many times do they print it? Maybe 1 out of 10. I have a customer, looking at some of this stuff, and they were very hesitant. I'm like, hey, why are you taking this Revit model and dumbing this down into your as-built and saying, make everything black and white? Because that's what we've always done, and someone's probably going to print this out sometime. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but you can print it out in black and white, even if it's color.
Yeah. So a lot of times, though, on the subcontractor side, we would color code systems, not so much for the model, like, to make a pretty model, right? It was more about informing the field about what each system was without them having to go back and look at documentation. So I came from the construction layout world, so I'll just put it in these terms, right? So I wanted to give my guys that were laying out, whatever system, you name it, they had to lay out something, and they needed to know essentially what kind of hangers went in there, what system this was for, all that sort of stuff. The easiest way to give them that information was to provide them with the location points, obviously, of the hanger, of said hanger, but also to color code everything so they could see it out in the field without literally having to go through. I don't know if you guys have used data collectors or have you BIM 360 layout. You've got to pour through a bunch of clicks to get through all the properties. And if I have to do that for every single item, it's a pain in the butt. So we color code this stuff. Yeah. Just makes life a lot easier, especially during coordination too. I know that, hey, look, this is a cold water line and it's hitting that steel girder. Something needs to change here, and it's definitely not going to be steel girder.
Yeah, but going back to the point, with having a printed sheet, I think that in itself is crazy because, we all know those people who have to have, they like the feeling of paper.
PDF Bluebeam tangent here.
Well, somewhat, I guess. You know what? Actually, it's going to be somewhat of a Bluebeam PDF, but also BIM 360. My thought process is when you have people with hand sets of drawings, you don't know how often that person comes in and prints off a new, double checks that drawing and prints off a new set. So people out in the field are talking to this person, they're talking to that person. And it's funny because I was just talking to someone about this the other day. The data that you get could vary by the person that you see on the job site. And that in itself is inexplainable, right? That's I don't understand that. When you have this data available, everybody should have the capability to get to it when they need it, right? And then secondly, as things change, as things adjust, we need to see that versioning. And when you're looking at a 2D PDF, even in Bluebeam, the compare and overlay strong features that really tell us, kind of show us what has changed. But even then, it's a disconnected PDF. I still love Bluebeam. I still think that, it's a huge part of our industry because, PDFs are. But in the all reality of things, I'm looking at BIM 360 and seeing that when I print my sheet from Revit, I can literally click on elements within this, a quotation mark 2D view, right? And even in Revit itself, as I'm maneuvering around, when I'm looking at a floor plan, it's really just a cut of that full 3D model. And if we can take that and transition that data, just make that almost like an industry standard where we're cutting the model, we're placing the sheets, and it's in an interactive environment like it is in BIM 360, it makes sense. Not only, being able to connect them with, if you need somebody that's going to do design review and they only want to see the sheets, great. But if you have somebody that's, even more intertwined with the design itself, actually getting into that 3D viewer, spinning around, sectioning through that model, cutting it as you need to, placing markups on an actual 3D model and sharing that information, right? I think that is huge for our industry. Just being able to connect it as the model changes, as it grows, it keeps everybody coordinated on the same page, and it allows us to move forward at that same pace.
I think in a perfect world, you and I would require, hey, you have to use BIM 360, you have to use Revit, you have to have a scanner.
Well, I'm just
scan data on nearly every project.
Yeah. Well, I'm using that as an example, right? I just think that because it's what I know, but at the same time, it's a good example in the sense that when I look at a sheet in BIM 360 and I click on, let's say, a wall, I pull all of the metadata for that wall, all of the properties. I don't need to use a paint bucket to dump, paint on it. I don't need to draw a line down it and say the depth is 8 feet. This wall knows it's a wall. It knows how tall it is. It knows the materials that it has. Why can't we optimize the use of that data? Why am I remaking this stuff after this is printed? Like, the work that's already put into that model should be taken out, right? If we have good data in, you get good data out. If we can optimize that information, everybody is better.
The disconnect has historically been that they would need to, the end user who wants that data would have to know Revit to get that information.
Negative.
No, historically.
Okay.
In order for me to get that data, I would have to use Revit to get that information.
Okay. Yep, you're right.
Otherwise, I would have to use a third-party tool and kind of reverse engineer, use all these fancy tools to get that data. And there is a place and time for all this stuff, right? But on the BIM 360 side, I'm with you, man.
So wait, time out though. Time out.
This for 7 years.
I can also print my schedules into an Excel spreadsheet, and almost everybody uses Excel. You know what I mean? So we can still keep everybody integrated with that design process and communication.
I don't know, man. The construction dork guys that seem to think that Power BI is gonna put.
It runs off Excel, though. Come on, it takes an Excel data right now.
Greg, what are you guys using? Are you guys getting into any of the fancy new technology out there? I say fancy. It's just Power BI. Are you guys doing anything with analytics and dashboards and any of that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I've got a nice experience with the that retail customer I mentioned. It's a really fantastic experience to have. I certainly know that I don't know it all, but from soup to nuts, from early conceptual design all the way through field management and operations, it's basically all in Autodesk right now, and so I get to see and help facilitate that workflow through barcoding all the equipment and everything, and it's really fantastic.
Was this a BIM 360 field with the barcoding? I'm just curious.
It is transitioning from the old what do they call that? Classic.
Yeah, BIM 360 field is the classic to the new one, which includes you have the assets module. I've been on BIM 360 for about 7 years, since like that was my task, was BIM 360, and I've seen it transform, do this complete 180, but the asset tracking has always been, the equipment tracking has always been my favorite component of BIM 360. And now that we have that available in the new version, I haven't gotten a chance to play with it, but what you're talking about right now, that is the best workflow.
Right. So it's really, I think, at the turning point right now. I won't say it's fully mature by any means, but I think we're right at that turning point where it's a good time to adopt, because it's all downhill from here. I think that corner is turned, and I think it's a good time to adopt those things. And again, like soup to nuts, when you have the end in mind that you're going to manage a facility, and you start building in specs and you start building in coordination, with a risk management in mind, all of that plays to, really just benefit that owner. And when they're smart, there's no stopping it.
No, I agree. It's how can they consume that data? How can they use it? It's I don't know. It's a good thing to see, and I think we are, like you said, heading that way, and seeing that it's on the downhill slope. I think that's amazing, because the more that we can, I think, broaden that usage and show that usage case, the better, right? We're going to see more adoption because of it, and I think that was a huge feature. And honestly, when we can start connecting reality, right, that actual real item with the digital environment, I think it's going to help everybody with almost one of the biggest parts of BIM, right? Visualization. And visualizing and seeing that data, like, okay, this is real life, and I can barcode this. I can see exactly where I am in this model, and I can take this information. And Joey knows I've got this huge, just I don't know. It's not a dream anymore. Obviously, people are doing it, but I've got this kind of passion, the side passion for like manufacturing and some of these plants and connecting the maintenance with virtual or mixed reality, right? Actually doing training with mixed reality and augmented reality, And I think this all kind of goes to push towards that, right? That kind of intertwining. We want to say it's a digital twin. Most people are talking about scans most of the time. I don't care. Like, okay, cool, but let's make a digital twin of this, like this building, and let's actually connect it, right?
Well, a scan will get you, like, so if we're talking digital twin, we can take a scan of it, and yeah, somebody's gonna call it digital
Nah.
twin, but you can turn that into an as-built model and actually use that as-built model
Well, that's
as
what
your
I'm
digital
saying.
twin.
And then take the equipment, barcode it, everything, barcode some of those pipes, barcode the equipment, connect everything in itself to that digital world. And when these facilities maintenance, the management, what have you, these teams are taking care of this facility itself, this building, and everything inside of it. That data is intertwined. It's easy to get to, because I mean, honestly, dude, when you jump into Revit right now, if you're a new user, you jump into Revit. Do you know what you're going to do? Do you know how to navigate that project?
Yes. No, I don't.
Well, no, it's you get into these big projects and they're very complex. That project browser can get overwhelming and people don't know how to navigate through that, right? You got to simplify this data again.
Well, that's
and
why
put it
you
in
just
something they
start deleting
understand.
all the views that you don't think are relevant to you, and then sync, right? Is that? No, I'm just kidding, guys. Don't.
Like, dude.
Somebody's gonna listen to this. Oh yeah, I just did it. No, I'm just don't do that, guys. Just kidding. So I mean, this kind of ties back to what we were talking about earlier. So you're talking about this having this as-built model and populating all this information. Um, if you can have all of that data as part of your, so it's you have to have a smart owner. The owner has to know what to require. Um, and then the team just has to come together and deliver it, right?
Yes.
The issue that we fall into is that the system that the owner has, and this kind of plays back into why or 2D and PDF as-built's the requirement. Honestly, it's because most FM systems only take CAD. There's been a few that have customized that allows us to take Revit models, and that's progressing. It's starting to happen. Probably about 2 years in the tooth where this has actually been a thing. But it's not like a direct like one-to-one where I just take this and automatically maps to my FM system. No, we've got to do a whole bunch of setup. We've got to, this has to be exported in a Kobe format, and this has to map up with this, and it's just it's kind of a pain in the butt. It's a whole segment of BIM in itself to make that transition. So it really takes an educated owner on the front side to request things in a certain format, so that at the end of this, if we're using, say, BIM 360, they're giving us all this, properties, so that we're, pushing from field to glue and back to our BIM model. And then from there, we'll do this one push click to BIM 360 ops, so they can use that as their maintenance ticketing system.
Yeah.
Whatever that looks like, or if maybe they're requiring stuff in a certain format, they're using, hey, you got to use DB Link and you got to populate all this data, whatever it is, with this 3D model, so that we can plug it into our FM system. There has to be an education between the FM team and the field team. And you're talking about this like, the grandiose BIM, right? Where they're out on the actual inside of the facility. They got the goggles on and they're walking around, and heads up display pops up and it's like, hey, this is a valve, turn 3/4 to the right. And it's got a training dialogue built in. It's got all this stuff, and it's really smart and intuitive. And that's an amazing thing that one day hopefully becomes the norm in these complex facilities. But that owner has to know what that headset is going to need in the future, or what, like, there has to be a whole thought process, a whole architecture that goes into defining this kind of scope. I don't know, man, it's crazy. We work with a lot of, I won't say any names. We work with a lot of big tech companies, clients that work with a lot of big tech companies that have ridiculous specifications, and we get to like kind of fine tune stuff to that, and it's amazing to be part of those scopes. But at the end of the day, it's like, man, you realize, like, what are they really putting this through? Are they going to put it through some headset? Or are they going to do all this stuff? There's so much to think about.
Well, another key thing to think about here too is, we're talking about the handoff, right? And over to the facilities management team. And unfortunately, that's where a lot of the design models go to die, right? At that point, the design model stops being updated, the construction model, what have you.
Yeah, but I got something else for you though.
And well, as you start pushing through that, the facility, people update the building, that design, even the BIM data does not get updated, right?
Yeah, but I have something else for you with a different approach.
Mm-hmm.
So this is not necessarily conventional, but the approach that we're taking is, you're very familiar with BIM 360 documentation. Instead of treating that as a project site, treat it as a facility site. So as you're doing a project, you're really setting it up to say, you know what, this isn't going to be a project and it's going to die here. This is going to live here. And when we do our next project, it's just going to continue on.
Yep.
It's not necessarily what it's meant for right now, but we are making it work, and it's working out really well.
Are you providing the license in that case, or is the owner hosting the site?
The owner is hosting the site, but requiring anybody participating, they're going to buy licenses.
So that is the norm with a few customers that we have. There's maybe a conversation offline, but this is a trend that we're starting to see, and I quickly see, like, I'm hoping at some point Autodesk comes up with this bring your own license model, because that to me makes the most sense with all this. If we can have an owner host the site and everybody just brings their licenses to it.
Yeah. I mean, that's actually what we're doing. The owner hosts that, they own it.
The design side, gotcha.
Whenever they want to, and just invite whoever they want to work on it, but they're going to buy some licensing to have access to it.
Mm-hmm. And I like that. If we could connect that, I think with that, long term, right? And BIM 360 Ops, connecting the actual design or that construction model, that existing as-built model, to a facilities management. So that way, when they update a pump, or they update these valves or anything like that, they take the barcode, they scan that new element in, and guess what? That's reflected back into the original model.
And that's probably one of the bigger issues. Like, we talk about this, we've got this pie in the sky idea of what BIM should be, and it's all encompassing, not just the construction life cycle, but the whole building life cycle. Really, the space planning side and the updating and all that stuff, it's kind of few and far between of making itself even back into the 2D documentation rather than the 3D. Yeah. So, I mean, it's really about, like, trying to put forth this industry standard of BIM, but not just BIM for construction, but BIM for, like, everything, right? We really got to do a better job at educating more people about BIM. And it sucks because, if you're anything like me, you're probably sick of hearing the term BIM, and digital twins, quickly becoming there too, right? It's
buzzword.
Buzzword. Yeah, SIM, BIM, digital twin, you name it, man. Coordination. It's like, all right, what do you really mean when you say this? Because it has 1,000 different meanings and different levels of specification.
Yeah, I love the idea of just making it live on. Treat it as if it's not going to die, that you're ready for that next project whenever it may start.
That's it, man.
You just keep going.
Yep. That's it. And I mean, honestly, if we can keep that if we could start like that, if that's a trend, I would fully support that trend, because every owner in that sense would be able to, they don't have to go back and hire somebody to go and document their as-built and update this old model that they've got. It's a living, I don't want to say a living document, but a living thing, right? This information because BIM is not just building information modeling, right? It's building information management for the building itself. You need to keep this information, and if we can update the model, great. Just that.
You sound like Johann Tuckler. BIM is more than models.
BIM is more, dude. That's exactly what was popping up in my head. I was like, man. # BIM is more than models. As you guys are talking, it's funny, but it really is. We need to transition this, and it's a different kind of thought process at that point. That it's not just this model. It is everything about this building. This building itself we need to have all of this information in this model, or just included around where it's accessible. Right? Because, I mean, yeah, if we could keep all of the data for every single thing in that model, that'd be great, but it's going to be huge. It's going to be bloated, right? And it's going to be maybe hard to navigate. But if we can kind of put that into something that people understand, you chunk it out, right? And give it in a way that they understand it, I think that's just beneficial for everyone involved.
I agree. And I feel like I don't want to end this on a sour note. So I kind of want to transition right now because I feel like we've been a little sour on the industry. Like, get up to our standards, damn it. No, but that said, like, I really want to talk about some positive things that you're doing, Greg. Like, one, not only are you pushing BIM forward, you're an advocate for clear edge and just point clouds and scan data and all this stuff that we hold near and dear to our hearts. But I was reading in your bio that you go to Haiti, you provide engineering consultation, design services to Haiti Providence University. I just want to chat more about that, man.
Yeah, sure. So everybody knows the 2010 earthquake. It hit big, and I think it's probably the biggest natural disaster ever to hit. Other than wiping out the dinosaurs, it was pretty big as far as human life goes. And I just happened to be in a position working as a structural engineer at the time, and sitting there as like everybody else working your day away, and had a buddy of mine come up to the desk and say, "Hey, you feel like going to Haiti next week?" I was like, "What? What are you talking about?" It's like, "Yeah, someone asked me to go. They've got a mission trip to go down there and help out, see what we can do for some damage assessment and help them get back on their feet." Like, yeah, I don't have anything going. Let's go. So got over the fear of going to a third world country and headed down to Haiti. I can remember getting off the plane at the Port-au-Prince airport, and the stewardess looks at me and she says, "Don't worry, it's going to be okay." I'm like, "Oh, you can tell, huh?" So, she could see the look on my face as I'm trying to get off the plane, that there's a little bit of fear in my eyes, but, certainly got over that relatively quick, worked with a church organization, and, they got us introduced to a lot of people, and just the amount of damage was just phenomenal. So used my structural engineering background to assess some projects. Buildings that were partially collapsed, and, kind of what could they do. And, you start to see the bigger picture of, the standards of living and things like that, and their construction practices. I'm like, oh my goodness, how do they get away with building things like this? It's just extraordinary. So there was a lot of education on my part. So I probably spent, I don't know, 2-3 nights, 2 or 3 of those first nights just studying about building, and what it took. And, luckily had a place to stay that could get an internet connection, and just basically just downloaded everything I could see and just read like crazy. And we ended up going out and training their architects and engineers like how to build better, and that was, by the seat of my pants, just learning everything about how they were doing things and observing these structures and what was going on. And more so than like giving an actual assessment and telling them what to fix, was more along the lines of, teaching people how to fish, tell them how to, do these things better, do it for themselves, and not just tell them what to do or do it for them. So started to, work with them to teach them how to build better, and then also how to teach others how to build better. So gave them a lot of resources, ended up making 3 separate trips, and basically through that same church organization, they had started a new university, and that university is faith-based, and they took a different stance to try to educate people, and I really believe in this. To the way out of the poverty and everything else is through education. That's the absolute best thing you do. Instead of just giving something to somebody or building it for them, or whatever it is, you teach a man to fish, and they can fish for life. So, we really focused on that, and that's what they do at that university. So I've been kind of a help and a part of that, helping them, kind of review their buildings, review their site plans, review some other stuff. Have done some scanning down there, have flown drones over their sites to give them better senses of things, have taught people how to fly drones, giving them more tools in their tool bag that they weren't aware of. And, it's a great thing. It's a great thing to be part of.
That is awesome, man. That is awesome. We actually have a coworker, a friend of ours, who went to Haiti and helped rebuild all that sort of stuff. Not to the level you did. It sounds like you were the whole "teach a man to fish" is a great mantra for us to live by. I'm blown away. I wasn't expecting this much great content in one podcast. So I just want to say thank you for your time, and I really think that we should do this again.
Yeah, I think so as well. Thank you again, Greg, for coming on. Really.
Yeah, thank you guys. Pleasure being on and shooting the breeze. And we're all passionate about this stuff, and we just love doing it.
Love it. That's a great note to end on. We love doing it, guys.
Cheers.